Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the New Mainstream Podcast,
where we explore the impact of multicultural consumers on marketing and media.
I'm your host, Mario Carrasco, and co-founder of Think Now. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the New Mainstream Podcast. I'm your host, Mario Carrasco. Today, super excited to have Gabe Mederos. Gabe's a leading expert in digital marketing, influencer strategies, over 18 years experience in marketing, communication, social media, currently serving as vice president at Edelman, driving innovative campaigns that blend creative storytelling with data-driven insights, especially when it comes to integrating diversity and influencer marketing. So super excited to get your thoughts there. Gabe, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So you started out your career. You knew you wanted to be in social media influencing, right?
Quite the opposite. It's interesting because I tell some of the younger people on my team that there was no social media when I when I started, and and it's like, wow, you're a dinosaur. That's great. But no, I actually started on my career with a political science degree. So, thought I was going to be a politician, and that changed like almost immediately after graduation. And then just kind of fell into communications and PR. So I did that for many years, like worked in different companies, primarily in Canada, working on PR and communications. And again, kind of fell into social media as well. So I was working for a regional government in Canada, and it's when the boom of like Facebook happened. So again, talk about showing your age, but so Facebook started to emerge, and like people were starting to use it a little bit more. So I took it upon myself to say, like, hey, let's build out a strategy for the region to talk about Facebook and how we can leverage Facebook. So
what was it about? Because I remember,
Yeah.
I remember the .edu days personally, when you had to have a .edu.
I remember that. Yeah.
What was it about social media to you that you were like, you know what, this is going to be important? Because when it came out for me, like I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really think much of it, but it's obviously it's transformative. What for you made it be like, you know what, this is important?
It was that one-to-one communication that you couldn't get in any other way. So like, I mean, the majority, like even within PR, within communications, it was really just promoting, amplifying your message, but there was no two-way like dialogue. It was very much like, here's what we want to say, here's what we want to say. And the reality is, like, even the way that we would measure that is based on, oh, how many people you reached, but you really never saw, like, did it work, right? So what really intrigued me, even from the first days of like social media, is that ability to have that dialogue. So you're talking to your audience, but they're talking back, and it gives you, it's very much like the social component of it. I thought is what was intriguing, because it's as a business, it took a long time for businesses to start to understand, like, okay, when we're talking to our audience, it's not just, it's not an ad. You're not just promoting messages and then they're going to say, yes, that's great. It's like, you're going to have this dialogue, and it changes the way that you communicate fully as any kind of brand or any kind of organization. But it really just had that. It's a different type of element that was, to me, more grassroots and more just authentic, right? Because it is having a conversation with your audience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering, was that your poli-sci background coming in, where you understood
I think so. It's like,
the
it's like the
dynamics
voice
of
of the
that,
people,
right?
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us,
Mhm.
where were you at in your career when Facebook came out and you were like, okay, I'm gonna put some time into learning about this?
Yeah, so I was at the region appeal, so it was a regional government in Ontario, Canada, and it was really just it was one of these things where it came out, and I just talked to the team members, like to my leaders, and I'm saying, can I just spend some time putting together what I think is a strategy that might work for us on how we begin to integrate this as part of our communication ecosystem? And they're like, yeah, like honestly, it was interesting because like people were like, yeah, I use it personally, but nobody kind of saw any potential for it beyond that. So they're like, well, if you want to try it out, like if you want to come up with something, go ahead and we'll see, it might not come to anything. And that's what I did. So I was like, all right, let me go into it. Let me check it out. Let me do some research, see how we can leverage it, and came up with this strategy that truly I was like, I had left before it was implemented, but I think what they did is they took that as a basis for what they implemented for the region, which I thought was great. But that's where like that bug hit me. So then I'm like, okay, I want to work in roles that have that component to it. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of there was very few of any roles that were just social media, but a lot more organizations started to understand that it was as part of your communication plan. Oh, if you know social media, that's also helpful as well. So I started to look for more of those kinds of roles, and it led me to a plumbing manufacturer of all things. When you're talking water, you're talking pipes, and it was in a B2B space where it's like, okay, now is a different challenge. How, like, are we going to use a Facebook? Is it something else? Like, there's discussion boards. How do you tap into those? So that it's kind of like, yeah, the bug bit me, and I'm like, I wanted to kind of progress, keep going more and more and more into that, which kind of led me to where I am. But in the meantime, like I worked at Purina, heading up like social media and PR for them, and TELUS, a big giant telecom company in Canada, which again, heading up their social media program there. That's actually, well, actually, that's at Purina, truthfully, where I started to deal more with influencer marketing as well, because that was the next iteration. So now you had social media, now you as an organization talking and talking, but there's that element of PR that kind of stuck through. It was like, okay, well, that third party validation is really where people start to trust the brand, and they start to really want to learn more about the brand. And it's like, how do you do that? So even working at Purina, there was pet influencers. So can we talk to them? Can we have them talk about Purina? So started talking with like doggy bloggers and cat bloggers, and having them help spread the word a bit for us. And that evolved to TELUS, where they're headed up their influencer program. To Scotiabank, one of the biggest banks in Canada as well, one of the top 5 banks, again, heading up their influencer and social media. And it kind of evolved till where I am now, where it's, again, a VP of creator marketing at Edelman, working with a whole host of different clients, like really top brands in Canada, which is amazing, and working on their creator programs. So it's been a challenge. It's not a challenge. Well, it has been a challenge. It's been a journey, but I love it every step of the way.
You know what? So I just had a conversation a couple weeks ago with Maribel Lara. She was heading up. She's had multiple roles, but she was in the C-suite at VaynerMedia.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
and similar to you, it's interesting. She was not in the poly sci, but she started in the nonprofit educational
Mm-hmm.
world,
Yeah,
and realized that when social media came out, realized it was transformative,
yeah.
and took an interest in it. And I think, well, I'm connecting the dots here for early stage people in
Mm-hmm.
their career. Like, what's cool about both of your trajectories is like when you get in early enough in a technology or a trend, there's no expert, so you have the opportunity to be an expert.
Yeah,
I think that's cool. Like, you guys are just interested in it,
yeah,
and now now you're the expert. So like,
yeah.
just taking that interest and a little bit of time to experiment, right, can go a long way.
Totally. And I honestly, I always caveat the expert part, because I feel like it's in this space, in the social influencer, or we call it creator marketing space now, but it's evolving at such a quick pace that to claim expertise over it is almost unfair, because you're like, okay, what I know now about, like, even platforms, what I know now about Instagram or TikTok could change tomorrow. And the creator space is the same thing. Like, what I know about creator marketing is great, and it's from experience, and like, all this like learning that you've done, but we don't know when something hits the market and all changes. So I feel like what really, I think, drives my passion for these spaces, these areas, is that it's like ever evolving, and you have to continue to learn. So, if you're not focused on continuous learning, you're going to fall behind, and you can fall behind really quickly. So you're right. It's like there are no, like when I started, even to this day, I don't know that there are experts. I mean, there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge and a lot of background, which is excellent. But I feel like even they are constantly learning, because things change all the time, which is, it
Be
honestly makes it
wary of
cool.
experts, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, I honestly, it's like, so I also teach some like community colleges in Toronto on these topics, and I always kind of say, like, if somebody says that they're an expert, like, just think about it, because I mean, again, saying like, okay, I'm an expert on TikTok. TikTok's changed their algorithms like many times, and their platform. Instagram, like all of Meta, has changed multiple times, as has Google, as has LinkedIn. So it's really difficult. And creator marketing space, like it's creator marketing now for some, influencer marketing for others, like influencer relations for others. Like it's evolving. There's AI influencers. Like there's like it's such a like a constantly evolving space that yeah, to claim expertise, it's a little bit again, no like I have no judgment whatsoever. I think some people have a huge amount of knowledge, and that's great. I won't do it, but I won't claim to be an expert. I claim to be a continuous learner. Like so, and it's fun. It keeps you and how it focuses you to always kind of continue to go and trying to be cutting edge because that's what that's how you're going to learn and that's how you're going to evolve. So yeah, yeah.
What one of the things you mentioned, like two brands,
Hmm.
Purina, Scotiabank.
Yeah.
When I think of those brands, I think of them like kind of more traditional brands,
Yep.
like not necessarily taking big risks. So the fact that they had someone dedicated to social media to me is like, okay, that's a big
Yeah.
indicator. Um, how was it working? I don't want to say within the constraints, but like in a fairly new media platform
Hmm.
for more kind of traditional brands. Like how was that for you, and what are some lessons you learned there?
Yeah. The biggest lesson and one of the biggest like learnings is that you have to. It's not a matter of just like I'm going to implement best practices because that's their best practices. There's a component of learning that you have to incorporate in, and that learning is internal. So it's about not just I'm going to do this because I want to do this or because it's the right thing to do. It's like here's where we are, here's where we want to get, here's how the tools perform or operate. Here's where like influencers come into like fit in. This is the role that they play, and you have to kind of show that full picture to the team because it helps reduce some of that risk aversion, right? Because it's true with the bigger the brand, the tendency tends to be that they're going to be a little bit more risk averse, justifiably so. They have a lot more to lose. So with the education, it becomes a lot easier because if everybody feels that they have knowledge, even if it's like foundational or knowledge of how things are working and what you're trying to do, it tends to be a lot easier and it helps them, just ease a lot of their fears because that lack of knowledge of how stuff works is what tends to drive people to say like I don't want to do it. So, if you're going to somebody who's been a traditional communicator, for example, who only knows social media from what they use and like they don't necessarily like maybe they follow influencers that they don't even know they're following influencers. There's just somebody like a celebrity that they like or something along those lines. It's actually quite difficult for you to say like we want to run this like let's run this influencer program that's going to do this and we're going to make them do that and they're going to talk to some of our subject matter experts. Automatically they're like whoa, like no, like that's way too that like that's a bridge too far. But if you're saying here's how we're going to work it, here's how we're going to in a way kind of control it or manage it, here's what the output's going to be, here's how it's going to benefit us, then everybody tends to ease up a little bit more and they're like okay, yeah, all right, let's give it a shot. And it's also another thing that I learned in those scenarios is like it's all about scale. Like it's all about like being able to scale something. So you don't necessarily have to start with the biggest, boldest program. Sometimes smart start small, prove success, and build from there. Because again, people tends to when they're not familiar, and it happens across the board. It's not just like social or influencer or digital. When people don't know about something, they are always a little bit more hesitant. So if you're able to kind of build and show wins, they feel that excitement that goes along with it, and then they're gonna help champion that next program, and then the next program, and then the next program. So that's
No,
yeah, yeah,
that's yeah. You're to
mhm,
your point. That's good advice in general, right?
yeah,
You got to give people a little bit here and
yeah,
there. I think the tendency is like, oh my gosh, you don't know about social media. How do you know? Like
yeah,
that's instantly going to shut people off. You got to give them some wins. That's great
totally.
advice.
Yeah, it's like I feel like, and what I found in my experience is that people want to learn, right? So I mean, I'll take it even from a personal perspective. When I talk to other teams, like we work closely with, like I work closely with like analytics teams, and I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of analytics that they do. If they explain it to me, I'm all on board. Like I'll help sell it through. Like because I'm like, this is excellent. I love what you're doing. I love how you're putting these things together. I love how it integrates. So they drive that excitement in me. which is, again, it's similar to most people. Most people, when they don't know about something, it's not like, especially in big brands or in any organization, they don't tend to be like, I don't want to ever hear about it. They might say that. Like you'll have some more of the traditionals that'll say that. But when you start to talk to them about it, you can see that the wheels are turning, and then they can kind of see how it plays out, and that they're learning at the same time. And they tend to be like, honestly, what I found is they tend to like it. They tend to get excited about it. They tend to use it more, which is amazing. Like we've done programs, like I've done programs for clients explaining like, TikTok influencers to them, and they'll send me messages back. I'm on TikTok now. I'm like, excellent. Like you don't have to post. Enjoy. Be like, well, like a voyeur, but like not in the creepy way. But yeah, check out what people are saying. Look at the content. Enjoy the platform. And it's like that thing where they were scared before, is like, I don't understand any of it, to like, I'm going to try it out. It's such a different dynamic, because then when they're going to be the ones that come to you and say, I want to work with TikTok creators. Like I want to do these programs with TikTok. I'm like, excellent.
Is TikTok back, by the way? Is it back in the US?
It's back and yeah, it's back, and it never really left. It did for like
Okay.
about maybe like a half a day. It's back, but I think that there's a hesitancy around it, just because it could disappear. So, but it's still pretty popular. It's still there.
Yeah. All right. Good to know. Well, one of the things that was really cool in our previous conversation was, your interest and your advocacy around diverse
Mhm.
influencers. So, at Edelman, you're at the forefront, identifying, leveraging emerging social trends. Would love to hear more about how you're integrating like diversity data first solution into strategic planning, and
Yeah,
just like how do you bake in audience insights in that aspect?
totally. So it's really interesting, because the way that we approach like diversity within the creator marketing space is a reflection of society. So like in Canada, diversity is big. Like the country is known for being, a diverse, a diverse country with multiculturalism built into the foundations of the country. So it makes sense. It follows that when you're looking at creating a program that has creators, that diversity is reflected, because it's like, again, it's like people want to see themselves. They want to see themselves reflected within the content and within what they're seeing and how they see the brand, and they feel that connection, right? Like if you're feeling, if you see somebody that represents you within like branded content from a creator, it is like you feel more of that resonance versus, it's very homogenous and everybody looks the same, and then it's not me, and then it's like maybe I don't get it. So it's one thing that it needs to be built in. So what we're doing, and granted, it's a work in progress, it's something that's constantly evolving, is looking to make sure that we're not only that we're leveraging, or that we're looking at diversity when we are looking at creator programs, but specifically that it's not just tokenism, that we're actually looking at audiences, and like what audiences that the clients are trying to reach, incorporating creators that reflect that audience. And the biggest part of it is providing options. So like it's easy to say like we want to be diverse, but you have to show that diversity. So like we do it internally when we, as part of our hiring practices, we want to make sure that like our teams are reflective of this diversity. It's the same with it creators. So we look at, like, we leverage tools, and I will say that a lot of the influencer or creator marketing tools that are available still are a little bit limited in the ability to identify diverse creators. But we've had experience working across so many different programs that what we do is create lists of different types of diverse creators, and make sure that when we're looking at recommendations for example, for clients, that they're reflected, that there is diversity reflected. And we also, again, we like to avoid the tokenism. It's not like it has to be 50% or this percent. It's about looking at a program and holistically, and saying, like, when you look at this list of recommendations that we're providing, are they diverse? And beyond just like the identification and the recommendations, it's also looking at how we work with creators. So understanding like their scenarios, their like their own situations. So like we know that in Canada, and I think if I might be speaking out of turn, but I think in the US it's very similar. Diverse creators tend to, on average, um, make less than again your traditional creators, let's say. Um, one thing to look at is that is like, okay, well, if you're looking at a whole scope of all these creators and you have a budget and you're looking at like breaking down the budget, if you have like a diverse creator that's coming in and quoting like much less, it's an education for them to say, like, based on your following, based on your reach, based on your influence with a specific audience, your rate should actually be higher. So, which is like, I mean, I know sometimes like I'll have some brands want to kill me. They're like, wait a sec, you're going to pay them more? But yeah, because creator marketing at its core is relationships. It's all about relationships. It's your relationship as a brand with the creator's relationship with their audience. It's all based on relationships. And if you're going to take that and that best practice and incorporate it, you have to be building that relationship with the creator that's based on transparency and honesty. So it's our job, like as agencies and as brands, to actually talk to these creators and like some of the diverse creators and say, where you are, you have to be higher. You should be higher. You should demand more because you are equivalent. Like you have the equivalent to these other creators. And talk to them about it in the reality, like to show them, like, you know, based on your following, this is what on average you should be getting. So we're going to pay you more because you deserve more. That helps to build that relationship with those creators that are built on trust. It's also other things like on how you contract, like, I mean, or sorry, some of the requirements. Well, contracting as well, making sure that you're also like, again, paying them what they're worth, contracting them in a fair way. But it's also how you manage them. So, like, say for instance, the example that I always use is like, for example, we have a program and like we're asking creators to create content, and it might be for a food brand, and they're going to create content. They're going to eat. You know, we want them to eat something, a picnic in the park or something like that, whatever it may be. Great. So you have to take into account like in the diversity of the creator. So if you're asking a creator that's Muslim and it's during Ramadan, you can't ask them to do that. Not only because it's unfair to them based on the religious beliefs, but it's also not authentic. So in that case, you could change that to say like, okay, they're going to be eating off like the regular like hours, which is fine because that shows that this is true. We respect who they are as a person, and we're supporting it. So those little things, it's just like little things that actually mean a lot to creators because you're saying like you're looking at their diversity and you're helping them, you're helping to promote and you're helping to celebrate it. Even how you evaluate, like we in creator marketing, we have a lot of our evaluations based on some similar metrics. So, you know, impressions or reach or engagement rate, that's fine. But there's other things like with some diverse creators, if they have like smaller audiences, it's not always going to be an apples to apples comparison. They might have, oh, well, they reach less people. They have less impressions. They might have less engagements, but we have to look at it for what it is. They might be very, very influential with a very specific audience, in which case you're not going to compare apples to apples. What you want to do is look at it and say, okay, maybe they are very influential with a specific audience. What's the sentiment? Like, so what is their audience saying? Is their audience, which again is maybe a very specific, diverse audience that you're trying to reach, are they 100% supportive of what this creator is saying? Because if they are, that's huge influence that you're driving for the brand. That's a potential for incredible brand love and brand affinity. So it's looking at like, even when you measure that you're not just doing this like templated across the board, everything's the same. It's looking at that diversity, looking at some of the differences and making sure that they're reflected in how you run a program. So I know very long winded, but that's
No,
kind
no,
of what
no.
we're trying to do.
I
Yeah.
love that because it's, you know, you're anchoring it one, like you mentioned, it's not just checking a box for diversity's
Yeah.
sake. You're anchoring it to audiences that they reach.
Yeah.
And to your point, your second point, where diverse creators may undervalue themselves, when you look at that matrix of the audience they reach,
Mm-hmm.
it even though it's smaller, it might be more valuable,
100%.
right?
100%. Yeah.
We've done some research on not influencers, just the average diverse consumer in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
They have more diverse connections than non-diverse.
Yeah.
So, meaning if you put some dollars just to regular consumers, well, I guess influencers, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
that are reaching diverse consumers on social media platforms, the network effect is bigger.
I can imagine. I
Um,
like it makes so much sense. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's really interesting, and all of this as you're talking. I'm realizing you're talking about this from a Canadian perspective,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Canadian brands, and I'm wondering. I have to ask the question. I don't know
yeah,
if you know what's going on in America or the U.S. I should say
yep,
when it
yeah,
comes to diversity, but it's
yeah.
not a word that's thrown around anymore now, right? Lightly, right? There's some legal implications. I mean, are y'all running into that kind of backlash in Canada right now, or is it?
There is some spillover. There is. I feel like it's really interesting. Not in a, like in a legal term or like in terms of like
Yeah,
um,
I'm just thinking of
yeah.
the cultural zeitgeist. DEI has been weaponized over here, right? Like
It's interesting because like I feel like we're still a very like Canada is a very very multicultural country, so you do see pockets that are popping up that are having similar debates or similar um, POVs on like on diversity and does it wokeism that it all gets lumped in together, which is sad because the thing it's really interesting because I think when those arguments pop up, um, it's from people that don't have the perspective of these diverse people that have had to struggle. Like my family are immigrants. Most of the Canadians or families are immigrants. It just depends on where they're from, whether it's like Southeast Asia, from South Asia, from South America, like from Europe, wherever it may be. And then there's like this. It's almost like this segregation of certain areas, but we're all immigrants. So, Canada has very little, multi-generation Canadians. Are generally, it's a country built on immigration. So, um, we are seeing it, and it's unfortunate. I feel like the one thing that we have go and then hopefully, like knock on wood, that maintains is that since it is so embedded into the culture, I think there's always going to be, um, hopefully, there's always going to be this need for diversity and for representation because there's such a big population that is diverse. So, like, even if you look at it from sheer, like sheer percentage of the population, it would be very difficult. I'm not saying impossible, but it'd be very difficult to kind of to remove that component to it because we are a diverse population here. So yeah.
yeah, no, and this leads me to my next question. I was going to
Mhm.
ask you about like tailoring, um, whether it's campaigns or you know what just tailoring
Yeah.
campaigns to diverse audiences. But I guess by the nature of who you're working with, choosing the influencer is the tailoring, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It is. It's like we've run programs that are specific to specific communities, like like a Lunar New Year program, that is trying to reach like Chinese Canadians, for example, or those who celebrate. And it's like in those cases, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the creators that you choose that should help tell that story. Because the other component of it, like I mentioned before, like relationships are big with creator marketing. The other part of it that it's like critical is authenticity. If it's not believable, it's like it doesn't really matter. It's the difference between um, you know a Kim Kardashian and using a micro influencer. It's like
let's talk
right?
about that because
Yeah,
that's a question I get all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Authenticity. And I feel like you have a really unique perspective because I feel like influencer marketing from in my opinion is one of the most authentic if done correctly.
Exactly.
How do you know? Like, is there a data way of saying, yeah, this is authentic or this is not? Is it gut feeling? Is it,
Yeah.
yeah. How do you
It's
define authenticity?
I think you nailed it in the sense that it's like when done correctly, it's probably the most authentic. It's a mix of art. It's like art and science essentially. So it's a mix of data that shows you like, okay, we're at like what this creator's audience, who they reach, where they're located, like maybe what their demographic data that talks about their general age, which definitely aligns with like should align with what the audience you're trying to reach. There is a component though that is like, and then I mean, there's data that you can also look at that tells you like the programs that they've worked on, interests that they have. Like you could see if they like, if you're working for a soda brand, you could see if they've worked like with other soda companies or if in their content they've featured a soda. All that stuff is great. That's all database, and you can find that. There is an element of relationships that are super important, because if you actually build a relationship with a creator, you're going to get insights that no data platform can tell you. So, for example, if I have a relationship with a creator that, like, again, we're looking at promoting a soda product, and it they might not have posted anything about it, but I know that they like it because they talk to me about it all the time, or when we go out for lunch, they'll drink it. There's an element there within the relationship that you're able to build, that you can get some insight that still makes it authentic. So, because their audience might have seen them drinking, like, Diet Pepsi, for example, and then they drink Diet Pepsi. So when you do a Diet Pepsi program and you're showing it, like, it's authentic. But a lot of it, it's like, again, it's a mixture of that, like the data, but it's also a mixture of that relationship. But it's a fine balance, and it's not always easy. And a lot of times it's actually looking at these, talking to these creators and saying, like, listen, this is a program that we're working on. It's for this. Does it make sense for you? And we encourage them to be honest. Like, if this is something that you don't do, and I mean, I've had conversations like this where, working, as a client is a fast food client, and the creator is a health creator, and we're like, I don't think it's a fit. And then they'll be like, well, you know what? On my cheat days, I eat, like, I don't know, Whoppers. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, okay, so if your audience has seen that, cool. Then maybe you can do that and do that element of, like, the element of the content is based around that. The other component to the authenticity, which again is scary sometimes to brands, is providing the creators the opportunity to create based on what they know, based on what their knowledge of their audience is and what resonates. A lot of times brands want to say, this is the brief, this is what I want you to do, this is the messaging I want you to say, which is fine. That's an ad. So if you're looking at working with a creator and you're picking the right creators, allowing them the freedom to say, here's what the brief is about, here's what the product is, here's the key messaging for sure. How would this work for you? Like, how would you come up with a concept that you think that this will resonate with your audience, and trusting them to do that. Once you do that, that authenticity is elevated 100%. If it looks like an ad, it's an ad. If it doesn't look like an ad, it's an ad. And it's also like the types of creators that you're working with. Like, we do have a very strong distinction between what an influencer is and what a creator is. A creator, it's based on their passion for the topic that they talk about or the content that they create. An influencer has influence. Like, a celebrity is an influencer. Like a politician could be an influencer, but it's very, very different. It's not necessarily like, again, I'll use the example, and it's not to knock Kim Kardashian. Like, there's value to using those types of, like, influencers if you want to drive mass reach. But if you say, okay, Kim Kardashian is drinking, like a Diet Pepsi, for example, do we feel that she's actually drinking Diet Pepsi, or does she drink champagne? Like, you know what I mean? There's like, it might be, there's like sometimes there's a disconnect, because you're thinking, well, I don't know if she really uses this, like, based on who she is. Whereas if you're using a creator who might not have that reach, but it's very authentic, because, they've talked about it. They showed content on their own without it being paid, showing that they consume Diet Pepsi, for example. When they do a program for Diet Pepsi, people know it's an ad, yes, like, or a sponsored post, but they still believe it, because they said, like, I've seen them drink this before. There's that believability is critical. That's kind of what your point, like, to your point before, when there's that authenticity, it's incredible. Like, it's an incredible program, and it tends to really perform well. And it does a bunch of different things. Like, it could be, yeah, it drives awareness for sure. It drives engagement. Excellent. It could drive brand affinity. It could drive brand love. It could drive conversion. Like, there's all of these elements that it can do when it's done properly. It's the problem is that still at, like, within, at this time, people think influencer and they think more Kim Kardashian. And then they're like, well, I don't think it's going to work. And yeah, it might not. But the creator space is so diverse that you're able to, like, there's so many options to pick the right type of creator for your product or service.
Now, that's the first time I've heard the distinction between creator and influencer, and that's super helpful. And you touched on my next question about ROI. I think many times brands or marketers, they think of influencers and just brand awareness.
Yeah.
But we had a conversation about, no, with creator marketing or influencer marketing, you can actually get down to the granular
Totally.
conversion, like specific action. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that, about the measurement side and the ROI of things on the creator front?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing is like I tell clients, and like different brands, whatever, like when I talk to them about and the value of creators, for example, is that they actually could play within throughout the sales funnel, right? Or like let's say throughout the marketing funnel, they play a role within it all. So like, yeah, absolutely. In terms of driving awareness, they're really really good at that. But you know what's also really good at that? A paid Instagram post, right? Like like there's similarities there in terms of like, yeah, driving awareness with enough budget, you can drive awareness. Do creators do a good job of it? Absolutely, they do a good job of it because it's a different type of content that sometimes you don't have to you don't have to be like limited to what your brand look and feel is. It's maybe you can have some flexibility in terms of how you drive that awareness. But they also, and then yeah, the other thing that a lot of like people when they're using creators will say is like, well, I know they drive awareness and I know they drive engagement. So consideration, absolutely. So that engagement where, people are engaging with their content, if it's like a sponsored a post, and that engagement will help drive consideration for your brand. So that works out well, but it doesn't end there. So like there is opportunities to basically take that and like the creator content and push it all the way down the funnel where you're looking at awareness, you're looking at consideration, engagement, consideration, but you also could drive conversions. Like if you have, if you have an e-commerce store, you can provide them with links. Like you could have them share links to purchase materials. You can provide them like a lot of times they'll share discount codes and, can then actually drive, like again drive conversion. Then you're able to track it. Like there's so many different ways that you could do. You could drive them you could have them drive to like restaurants. You can have them drive to like destinations, specific websites. So in terms of even conversion, there's that element that they actually could play a really solid role in driving conversion. What I would generally suggest or recommend when you're looking at them to drive conversion is working with them over time. So longer term partnerships with creators tend to help you when you're driving them to that conversion stage. It tends to be a lot more, again, it's authenticity again. So it's more authentic if they're like they talked about this brand and how they're consuming the brand and content about the brand, and then they drive, hey, like listen, you want to purchase it, here's a discount code, go to this website and you can purchase it, just enter my discount code, there you go. And it tends to work well when it's like that longer term versus a transactional one where it's like, they might have never mentioned a brand before and all of a sudden it's like, hey, check this out, I buy it with my discount code. The conversion rates tend to be a little bit lower, but when done properly, they drive really good conversion. The other thing that they do with those longer term relationships, they're your ambassador. And if they're your ambassador, they're driving that loyalty. So they're driving that brand loyalty to keep coming back, to get more people interested. So it's more of that long tail like conversion where people are seeing their content, that your content like as a brand on their platform over and over and over. They start to understand that like this person really believes in this brand. They always talk about it. Like maybe they do shout outs for your content that's like not sponsored. Like it's just because they feel it. They feel that connection. They feel that ambassadorship to your brand, and then they're building that loyalty where it's like driving over time. So when you look at the whole marketing funnel, creators are it can be used throughout. It's just if done properly, right? And that's always a caveat with anything with the creator marketing. If you do it properly, they're effective throughout the funnel. If it's quick hits, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, no, and that's marketing 101 too, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
you can't just buy an Instagram ad and once you got to
Exactly.
sustain over time.
Exactly.
Um, what so believe it or not, we're almost at our time. Like, what are some trends in creator influencer marketing that you see in the pipeline? Of course, you mentioned one, AI.
Yeah.
Um, what is the impact of some of these emerging technologies?
Yeah. AI is
Are you all
interesting.
playing around with AI right now?
Yep. Yeah. We are in the sense like a lot of brands and like we are in a sense of helping us to streamline our processes when working with creators. There is the emergence of AI creators. And a lot of people like within the creator space are saying like, oh my goodness, like what's going to happen now with AI creators? Again, the biggest thing, like again, one of the elements, and this is just my own perspective on it, is it AI, are AI creators going to take over the creator space? I don't know. Because again, the biggest part of creator marketing is that authenticity. Like I think I mentioned it 1,500 times. With an AI creator, does that authenticity exist? Well, probably not, because they're not going to use a product, right? Like they're not going to use your product. They're not going to really incorporate it as part of their daily life because they don't have like that's not what they are. So does it help in terms of like would those AI creators help in terms of awareness? 100%. Would it help in terms of maybe engagement? Yes. Will it help in terms of like building an authentic relation with a brand? I don't know. Like it's still to be seen, but I think there is that level of authenticity that is removed from them, which makes it a little bit trickier. So I don't think the traditional creators are going to go away. I think they're just gonna it's going to be how they interact is going to be very different. One of the trends we are seeing in terms of well, I'll give you two trends that we're seeing, but one trend that we're seeing in terms of the creator space is long form content. A lot more creators are moving towards long form content, which is good. It's like longer videos, like podcasts.
How are we defining long
Yeah.
form now?
So it's like it's essentially like more serialized content. So it could be like video series. Like they could look at like even podcasts are a good example of that longer form
Like
content.
I guess more of is it like long when I think of long form, I think of I don't know
Like written
a
stuff.
half
Yeah.
hour show, right? Like
Yeah.
is there a time? Is it like 5 minutes? Because like TikTok's like 10 seconds. Like
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so even like platforms like TikTok are increasing their time frames to adapt for that. So, so it's like they're kind of moving towards that direction. But yeah, it is more of that. It's more about like less of the 1 minute like hits and more of like longer term where you can actually kind of tell an authentic story. And yeah, you'll see it almost like it's like serialized, where it's like, okay, this I'll talk about this today. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about something else, but it could be like related based on a topic. And you're seeing a lot more of that. It's like it's because it gives them an opportunity to tell more of a robust story. And it's also a trick. It's a little bit trickier sometimes for brands to integrate in a way that makes sense and that's genuine. Because like again with a single image or with like a minute long video or 30-second video, it's easier to integrate brands because it's like, oh yeah, here it is, blah blah blah. Here's a product, and here's how I'm using it. With these other series, it's more about like, okay, how are you providing value? So if you're looking at longer form content, it's maybe brands providing subject matter experts or sponsoring segments or things of that nature where they're integrating within that long form content, but in a way that kind of it just integrates a little bit better, a little bit more easier.
it sounds like full circle to brand placement,
Almost. Yeah, it is.
product
And you're seeing
placement.
that. Like it's interesting that because you're actually seeing that. You're seeing that in some cases what's happening is like it's product placement within these like within podcasts or within like these longer form videos. And you're like, oh, interesting. And it's the difference is it's not just a product sitting there, like they'll talk about it a little bit. But I mean, I think there's like huge opportunities for brands that have subject matter experts to incorporate that, right? So we're seeing that. Another trend has been creators like breaking news. Like you'll see like the emergence of political type creators that are talking like giving insights as like Midas Touch, for example, on TikTok and across all platforms on podcasts. Like it happens in Canada too. Like we have creators that like if you want your daily fix of what's going on in the world of politics, they're the ones that are telling you. So it's how people are consuming like information. It's happening a lot more through creators. So again, as a brand, can you tap into that in a way that's authentic? Yeah, you probably could if you're doing it properly. Or maybe as a brand you shouldn't be. Like there's all these debates, but that's kind of another emerging trend that we're seeing is like, yeah, like news is not people are not necessarily trusting journalists, or they are trusting journalists, but it's journalists on TikTok or journalists on X that are actually giving you the news versus tuning into like the nightly news to see what's going on. They don't trust that as much anymore. So it's an interesting shift into like how people are consuming like information. Yeah.
That's super interesting, and this is such a great topic. I mean, I could talk
Yeah,
about it
it is.
forever. It's like it's so interesting, right? Like social media is such a big part of our lives, and we don't think about the processes and
Mhm.
people behind. Like creating this stuff, right?
Yep.
It's deep, but no, that was awesome. So great hearing your journey, Gabe, and
My
pleasure
pleasure.
having you on. If people want to connect with you, I found you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
What's the best way to connect with you?
Honestly, LinkedIn is great. Email's fine as well too. Like it's at gabe.mederos, so GABE.MEDEROS at Edelman.com. Like, yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on, and thanks
Yeah.
everybody for listening.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks to everyone listening in. To get more multicultural insights, check us out at thinknow.com and follow us on social media. You can also subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform.